Growing up, one of my close friends had a family beach house. It was an incredible place. Huge, luxurious, and filled with all kinds of unique touches. They even had a full-time maid who stayed in her own small apartment tucked at the back of the property. Every now and then, I'd be invited along for a weekend trip, and it always felt like stepping into another world. One weekend, the family arrived for a quick getaway, but as soon as they opened the door, they realized something was terribly wrong. The house was in complete disarray. Furniture overturned, valuables missing, and shattered items scattered everywhere. It looked like someone had torn through the place, leaving chaos in their wake. TVs, electronics, pieces of furniture gone without a trace. Naturally, one of the first things they thought to do was check on the maid. They went to her little apartment at the back of the property, but when they got there, they found it completely empty. All of her belongings had vanished, and it was clear she hadn't just stepped out. She was gone. They called the police, who came by to investigate. After a brief look around, the officers didn't seem especially interested. They suggested that maybe the maid had been involved in the robbery. Perhaps she had planned it all, taken what she could, and disappeared. It was the only explanation that seemed to make sense, and for the next week, the family accepted it as the truth. Then, the following weekend, the dad decided to return to the beach house to sort things out, planning to change the locks and see if any further security measures were needed. This time, he brought their family dogs along, thinking they'd enjoy the fresh air and open space. While he was busy working, one of the dogs wandered off toward the backyard, sniffing around curiously. Suddenly, the dog started digging near an area close to the pool, where a blue tarp had been lying on the ground. Intrigued, the dad went over to check, only to feel his heart sink as he realized what was hidden beneath. Under the tarp, buried in the dirt, was the maid's body. She hadn't run away or taken part in the robbery. Instead, she had been a victim herself, possibly recognizing whoever had broken into the house, which may have sealed her fate. One night, my uncle was at his favorite local bar. It was a quiet, dimly lit place where he often went to relax and enjoy a drink after a long day. That evening, he struck up a conversation with a stranger sitting nearby. He described him as a really nice guy, the kind of person who seemed easy to talk to, with a friendly smile and an unassuming demeanor. The two of them got along well, chatting about everything from the weather to sports, even diving into their thoughts on the latest movies. Their conversations were casual, yet there was something about the man's calm, collected manner that made my uncle feel like he'd known him forever. This wasn't just a one-time encounter either. They met up several more times at that bar, almost as if fate kept bringing them together. Then, just as unexpectedly as the stranger had appeared, he vanished. My uncle didn't see him again, and he figured that maybe the guy had moved on to a different bar, or perhaps he was just caught up in his own life. My uncle didn't think too much of it, and soon forgot about the encounters. Sometime later, my uncle received a letter that would bring him back to that stranger in the bar in a way he never expected. It was a notification for jury duty. Like most people, he wasn't exactly thrilled, but he showed up at the courthouse, ready to fulfill his civic duty. As he sat in the jury pool, listening to the case introduction, a chill crept down his spine. The case involved a notorious serial killer who had been apprehended recently. The man's name? Derek Todd Lee. Suddenly everything clicked. My uncle realized with a sinking feeling that the man he had spent hours chatting with over drinks, the nice guy who seemed so easygoing and friendly, was the same person now accused of such terrible crimes. Derek Todd Lee, a name that would forever be linked to fear and horror in the region, was the very same man he'd unknowingly befriended at the bar. Naturally, my uncle was promptly dismissed from jury duty due to his personal connection to the accused. But the revelation lingered with him, an unsettling memory that transformed those seemingly ordinary bar conversations into something darker and deeply chilling. Reflecting on it, he couldn't help but wonder about the conversations they had shared, the casual laughs, the harmless small talk, all while sitting next to someone capable of such unimaginable acts. It's a story my uncle still tells, but each time he does, there's a sense of disbelief in his voice, as if he too can't fully believe that his friendly drinking buddy had such a hidden, horrifying side. Years ago, I remember sneaking out of my friend's house late one night. We had nothing in particular planned. We just wanted to roam the quiet neighborhood, hiding from passing car headlights and embracing the thrill of the night. We were young, restless, and eager for adventure. Near my friend's house, there was a path that led to a small, homeless camp down in the woods, not far from the railroad tracks. We'd seen the trail before and had a general idea of what was back there. One of the men who stayed at that camp was actually an old friend of my buddy's dad. He had come by the house a few times, showered, and was friendly with the family. This man wasn't forced to live out there. He simply chose the off-the-grid lifestyle. That backstory made us think it would be cool and relatively safe to explore the camp at night. At first, we felt a little nervous, wondering if his dad's friend would be there, or if we'd run into someone we didn't know. But curiosity won over, and we decided to sneak up to the camp quietly, just to check it out. The walk was longer than we'd expected, our footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath us. When we got close, we noticed a small fire flickering, casting a faint glow around the trees and lighting up the woods in a warm, eerie glow. We crept closer, but we were cautious, staying on the trail as it led us toward the camp. When we were about 100 feet away, we suddenly froze. Just off the trail, we saw the faint outline of a figure. It was hard to make out details, but it looked like someone was standing there, just watching from deeper in the woods, beyond the campfire's glow. We ducked off to the side, our hearts pounding. I whispered to my friend that I had a bad feeling about this, and suggested we quietly head back. He nodded in agreement, clearly feeling the same uneasy chill. We carefully started moving back toward the railroad tracks, staying low and making as little noise as possible. After a few minutes, we had made some distance, and I suggested we get back on the trail where it would be easier to see. Navigating through thick bushes and branches made it hard to keep track of anything around us, and I thought we'd be better off if we could see what was coming in case we needed to make a run for it. We cautiously stepped out of the brush and onto the trail, glancing back toward the camp. The silhouette had moved closer, edging farther away from the firelight. It was hard to make out details, but something, or someone, was definitely there, closing in on us. My first thought was that maybe they'd seen us duck into the bushes and were coming over to check us out, but there was something unsettling in the way they moved. My friend and I exchanged a silent, panicked look. Without saying a word, we both instinctively started to pick up the pace, walking faster down the trail. Just then, we glanced back and froze for a split second. The silhouette had broken into a full sprint toward us. Absolutely silent. Without another thought, we took off, running as fast as we could. The trail was wide enough for both of us, so we didn't slow each other down. We didn't dare look back until we reached the railroad tracks. When we hit the bridge and crossed over to the other side, I finally turned around, catching my breath, scanning the path behind us. The figure was gone. There was no one there. We didn't stop until we got back to his house, hearts racing, but safe. We never did figure out who or what it was that had chased us out of those woods. To this day, the memory of that silent figure gives me chills. When I was young, I used to talk to a ghost. I never actually saw him. It was always at night, his voice drifting through the quiet darkness. I must have been about 5 or 6 when it started, though my memories are a bit hazy. I was certain it was a man, judging by the tone of his voice. I didn't know his name, and I don't think he knew mine. The first time I heard him, I was frightened. The idea of a ghost talking to me was more than a little scary. My first question, though, was a curious one. Are you a good ghost or a bad ghost? In my young mind, this was the most important question to ask. I laugh about it now. Out of all the things I could have asked, I chose that. I didn't ask about what it was like to be a spirit, where he was from, or even what his name was. Just, good or bad. He told me he was bad, but he never acted in a way that made me feel unsafe. He was just a voice in the night, a presence. Maybe a bit eerie, yes, but never harmful. Our conversations became a strange, almost comforting part of my nighttime routine, though I can't recall exactly what we'd talk about. Little snippets of conversations float in my memory. Mostly I think he just listened to whatever I had to say, which at that age was probably the ramblings of a curious kid. Then one day he simply vanished. I didn't hear from him again. Time went by, and I almost forgot about him. Years passed. 5, maybe more. By the time I was 10 or 11, he was barely a memory, like a half-remembered dream from childhood. But then, about 2 years ago, something strange happened. I was at home, in the basement, with my dad and brother. It was our routine to wind down with an episode of Bob's Burgers every night. We were laughing, totally engrossed in the show, when we heard it. A soft creak, then the sound of the door to the laundry room slowly opening. Immediately, my mind jumped to the idea of a stranger hiding in the house. I'd recently watched a video about squatters, so I nervously urged my dad to check every inch of the laundry room, even the crawl space. He searched, but there was no one there. We shrugged it off, chalking it up to a draft or a loose latch, though it left me feeling uneasy. Then, about a week later, something else happened. I was at school, working on an assignment in a room just a door away from my classroom. My teacher had allowed me and 2 friends to work there since I sometimes struggled with the noise in the main classroom. It was a quiet space with a sink on one side. My friends and I were focused on our work, seated at the far end of the room, away from the sink. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the faucet turned on by itself. Water gushed out, splashing into the sink for a full 5 seconds before stopping on its own. We stared at each other in stunned silence, then laughed it off, each of us trying to pretend it didn't unnerve us. But it was strange, too strange to forget. Since then, I haven't had any more odd encounters, but the memory of those experiences lingers. This past Halloween, as my friends and I swapped stories of strange and spooky moments, I found myself telling them about the ghost I used to talk to when I was a kid. Their eyes grew wide as I recounted the details. For me, it's always felt more interesting than frightening, a mystery I've never quite solved. But judging by the looks on their faces, my friends found it a little more unsettling. I can't help but wonder if children really do see more than adults. Maybe it's something about the way we see the world when we're young. More open, more attuned to things just beyond the ordinary. I haven't seen or heard from my ghost in years, but part of me wonders if he's still out there, waiting, listening,